certain authors have really given me a strong sense of character, how to write character, and how to write vivid characters. And one of these actually is Flannery O'Connor. You wouldn't really think that. I don't know. I say that because she's a Christian writer, and not all Christian writing is palatable, at least for me. But she is one of the best. Her characterizations and her stories are some of the very best I've ever read. And I decided I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to share one of her stories with you. It's called The Crop, one of her early ones. And it's set in, I think, probably the mid-50s in the South. Flannery O'Connor was a southern lady. And her protagonist here, Miss Willerton, is a lady of a certain age. Actually, she's my age. She's 44. And she lives in the family home with her 3 family members, Garner and Lucia, who apparently is the matriarch. They're pretty well off. Miss Willerton is sort of the odd lady out because she's very creative. Or she wants to be creative. And she wants to be creative by telling stories. And she probably could do it if she just followed the cardinal rule and stuck to what she knows. Instead, one morning Miss Willerton decides, having absolutely no knowledge of the subject, that she's going to write about sharecroppers. Miss Willerton had never been intimately connected with sharecroppers, but, she reflected, they would make as arty a subject as any, and they would give her that air of social concern which was so valuable to have in the circles she was hoping to travel. "I can always capitalize," she muttered, "on the hookworm." It was coming to her now. Certainly, her fingers plinked excitedly over the keys, never touching them. Then suddenly she began typing at great speed. "Lot Moton," the typewriter registered, "called his dog." Dog was followed by an abrupt pause. Miss Willerton always did her best work on the first sentence. First sentences, she always said, came to her like a flash. Just like a flash. And she'd build up her story from them. Lot Moton called his dog had been automatic with Miss Willerton, and reading the sentence over, she decided that not only was Lot Moton a good name for a sharecropper, but also that having him call his dog was an excellent thing to have a sharecropper do. The dog pricked up its ears and slunk over to Lot. Miss Willerton had the sentence down before she realized her error. 2 lots in one paragraph. That was displeasing to the ear. The typewriter grated back, and Miss Willerton applied 3 X's to lot. Over it she wrote in pencil, him. Now she was ready to go again. Lot Moton called his dog. The dog pricked up its ears and slunk over to him. 2 dogs, too, Miss Willerton thought. But that didn't affect the ears like 2 lots, she decided. He pulled the animal's short, scraggy ears and rolled over with it in the mud. Miss Willerton settled back. That was a good beginning. Now she could plan her action. There had to be a woman, of course. Perhaps Lot could kill her. That type of woman always started trouble. She might even goad him on to kill her because of her wantonness, and then he would be pursued by his conscience, maybe. He would have to have principles if that were going to be the case, but it'd be fairly easy to give him those. Now how was she going to work that in with all the love interest there'd have to be, she wondered. There would have to be some quite violent, naturalistic scenes, the sadistic sort of thing one read of in connection with that class. It was a problem. However, Miss Willerton enjoyed such problems. She liked to plan passionate scenes best of all, but when she came to write them, she always began to feel peculiar and to wonder what the family would say when they read them. Garner would snap his fingers and wink at her every opportunity. Bertha would think she was terrible, and Lucia would say in that silly voice of hers, "What have you been keeping from us, Willie? What have you been keeping from us?" and titter just like she always did. But Miss Willerton couldn't think about that now. She had to plan her characters. Lot would be tall, stooped and shaggy, but with sad eyes that made him look like a gentleman in spite of his red neck and big, fumbling hands. He'd have straight teeth, and to indicate that he had some spirit, red hair. His clothes would hang on him, but he'd wear them nonchalantly like they were part of his skin. Maybe, she mused, he'd better not roll around with the dog after all. The woman would be more or less pretty. Yellow hair, fat ankles, muddy-colored eyes. She would get supper for him in the cabin, and he'd sit there eating the lumpy grits she hadn't bothered to put salt in, and thinking about something big, something way off. Another cow, a painted house, a clean well, a farm of his own even. The woman would yowl at him for not cutting enough wood for her stove, and would whine about the pain in her back. She'd sit and stare at him eating the sour grits and say he didn't have nerve enough to steal food. "You're just a damn beggar," she'd sneer. Then he'd tell her to keep quiet. "Shut your mouth," he'd shout. "I've taken all I'm gonna." "Here, I ain't afraid of nothing looks like you," she'd say. Then he'd push his chair behind him and head toward her. She'd snatch a knife off the table. Miss Willerton wondered what kind of a fool the woman was, and back away, holding it in front of her. He'd lunge forward, but she'd dart from him like a wild horse. Then they'd face each other again, their eyes brimming with hate, and sway back and forth. Miss Willerton could hear the seconds dropping on the tin roof outside. He'd dart at her again, but she'd have the knife ready and would plunge it into him in an instant. Miss Willerton could stand it no longer. She struck the woman a terrific blow on the head from behind. A mist gathered around her and swept her from the room. Miss Willerton turned to Lot. "Let me get you some hot grits," she said. She went over to the stove and got a clean plate of smooth white grits and a piece of butter. "Gee, thanks," Lot said and smiled at her with his nice teeth. "You always fix 'em just right." "You know," he said, "I've been thinking, we could get out of this tenant farm. We could have a decent place. If we made anything this year over, we could put it in a cow and start building things up. Think what it could mean, Willie. Just think." She sat down beside him and put her hand on his shoulder. "We'll do it," she said. "We'll make better than we've made any year, and by spring we should have us that cow." "You always know how I feel, Willie," he said. "You always have known." They sat there for a long time thinking of how well they understood each other. "Finish your food," she said finally. Things take their natural course. In the following year, Willie finds herself pregnant. And on the morning after she's delivered the child, Lot, of course, is beside her, the supportive husband and father. "We got a daughter." "You wanted a son." "No, I got what I wanted. 2 Willies instead of 1. What can I do to deserve all I got, Willie?" He bent over and kissed her forehead. "What can I?" she asked slowly. "And what can I do to help you more?" "How about you going to the grocery, Willie?" Miss Willerton shoved Lot away from her. What did you say, Lucia? I said, how about you going to the grocery this time? I've been every morning this week, and I'm busy now. Miss Willerton pushed back from her typewriter. Very well, she said sharply. What do you want there? A dozen eggs and 2 pounds of tomatoes, ripe tomatoes, and you'd better start doctoring that cold right now. Your eyes are already watering in your horse. There's empering in the bathroom. Write a check on the house for the groceries, and wear your coat. It's cold. Miss Willerton rolled her eyes upward. I am 44 years old, she announced, and able to take care of myself. And get ripe tomatoes, Miss Lucia returned. This is where it really gets its hooks into me. I know exactly what she's talking about. Silly that a grocery should depress someone. Nothing in it but trifling domestic things. Women buying beans, riding children in those grocery go-karts, higgling about 1/8 of a pound more or less of squash. What did they get out of it? Where was there any chance for self-expression, for creation, for art? All around her it was the same. Sidewalks full of people scurrying about with their hands full of little packages and their minds full of little packages. That woman there with the child on the leash, pulling him, jerking him, dragging him away from a window with a jack-o'-lantern in it. She'd probably be pulling and jerking him the rest of her life. And there was another dropping a shopping bag all over the street, and another wiping a child's nose, and up the street an old woman was coming with 3 grandchildren jumping all over her, and behind them was a couple walking too close for refinement. Miss Willerton looked at the couple sharply as they came nearer and passed. The woman was plump, with yellow hair, fat ankles, muddy-colored eyes. She had on high-heel pumps and blue anklets, a too-short cotton dress, and a plaid jacket. Her skin was mottled and her neck thrust forward, as if she were sticking it out to smell something that was always being drawn away. Her face was set in an inane grin. The man was long and wasted and shaggy. His shoulders were stooped, and there were yellow knots along the side of his large red neck. His hands fumbled stupidly with the girls as they slumped along, and once or twice he smiled sickly at her, and Miss Willerton could see that he had straight teeth and sad eyes and a rash over his forehead. Ugh. Miss Willerton laid the groceries on the kitchen table and went back to her typewriter. She looked at the paper in it. Lot Moton called his dog, it read. The dog pricked up its ears and slunk over to him. He pulled the animal's short, scraggy ears and rolled over it with it in the mud. It sounds awful, Miss Willerton muttered. It's not a good subject anyway. She needed something more colorful, more arty. Miss Willerton looked at her typewriter for a long time. Then, of a sudden, her fist hit the desk in several ecstatic little bounces. The Irish, she squealed. The Irish! Miss Willerton had always admired the Irish. Their brogue, she thought, was full of music, and their history splendid. And the people, she mused, the Irish people, they were full of spirit, red-haired and broad shoulders and great drooping mustaches. I have such a kinship with Miss Willerton, I cannot even tell you.